Hello everyone, my name is Joaish. I wanna thank you guys first of all for bringing me onto here and to be a speaker, especially as the last speaker as I realized this week, which is fun. So hopefully we can finish off this amazing week strong, right? But so to introduce myself a little bit, I do a lot of streaming. I'm a Twitch streamer who streams a lot of speedruns, and I specialize in Zelda games specifically for speedruns. So I speedrun Wind Waker HD, Majora's Mask 3D, and I also speedrun some Mario games. Like I recently started speedrunning Super Mario Sunshine. I do some other playthroughs on Nintendo games as well. But even before I started streaming, I developed an interest myself in the world of game design and also just an increased enjoyment of writing in general through the use of an engine known as Zelda Classic. And today what my presentation will lead up to is talking about kind of the history and development and what my most popular game that I have released is called, which is what let me try that again. I'm going to be talking about my game that's known as the Slipstream. I'm going to be talking about kind of its development, like what kind of game it is, what it's like, and kind of what I learned from the experience of development. Because it's actually had a pretty interesting development history throughout the years. Yeah. So as far as my game design experience in general, I will say up front, I have not worked in the professional field, at least not yet. I have had a lot of interest in learning Unity, and I have gotten started on that at least, although I have been pretty busy with my personal life lately. It's definitely something I want to get into. However, I have had a lot of game design experience through the use of Zelda Classic, and this is what we'll talk about, at least for the first little bit of this presentation before we get to the actual game itself. But first off, what is Zelda Classic? What is this engine? There we go. So Zelda Classic, which is also known as ZC, so I'll probably be referring to Zelda Classic as ZC for the purpose of this presentation. But ZC is a fan-made clone of the engine that's based off of the original Legend of Zelda. So it's a complete recreation of the original Zelda's engine. So it plays very similar to it. It looks like it. It has a lot of features that are nearly identical to the original Legend of Zelda. Like if you have on just original settings with it, you can essentially play the original Legend of Zelda in it. But however, with ZC, it comes with this very versatile and user-friendly editor. So as you can see on this directions, as you can see on this picture over here, that's what the editor looks like. So you have let me move back over here. So you have like your graphics tier, your sprite editor. So it's based off of so for those that may not know what the original Legend of Zelda is like, it's the game that was released on the NES back in the 80s. So it was an 8-bit game back in the day. So very similarly here, ZC uses sprites. So it's primarily 2D based. ZC is. So you have your sprites here, and you build your screens here. Like each of the areas you make for each of the screens also work very similar to the original Zelda, where when you hit the edge of the screen, you go to the next one. It doesn't like freeform scroll, kind of like most modern games do, but they each have their own individual screen, which does lead to some interesting mechanics as well. As you can also see, you can have a lot of freedom over the colors. Like the color range is a lot greater. There's a lot more versatility in the kind of sprites you can make and how much you can do too. Like there's so much added to it over the years. The engine itself originally released, I think, in 1999, even like all the way back then. but I don't think it had its editor until like the mid 2000s, and even then, like until the early 2010s was when it really started to like have a lot of features implemented into it to make it really easy to edit stuff in it, make games with it. And so with making games in Zelda Classic, you use a combination of that. It also has an enemy editor. You can edit the enemies. It also comes pre-made with some of the Zelda 1 enemies, and also including like a lot of newer enemies and even some enemies that reference enemies in future games. And same goes with the items too. If you have the hook shot, you have the hammer in ZC by default. So at a very basic level, the program is really versatile in the sense that it's basic enough to understand for anyone just jumping into it with little game knowledge to be able to go in there and maybe make something simple. But it has like a lot of it's got a lot to the program as well, to where you can do a lot with the base program, and on top of that, you are able to use scripting and coding as well to add to it. And I believe it uses C+ for its basis on scripting. So you can really do a lot with this program. And I started using this program back in 2013. Of course, back then, a huge Zelda fan for pretty much my entire life. So seeing something like this, seeing essentially a Zelda maker, I was ecstatic at the idea back then. I was like, whoa, that's awesome. And so I started making games with it. And this is kind of where my game design experience started. And the first game I made, like probably around 2014, was a game called Lost Identity. And as you can see, you can have different graphics and such. Which I should clarify. There is a whole community around this, of course, and they have like a whole list of resources you can get. Like you can get graphics packs. Like for example, there's a lot based off of like the Game Boy games, some of the future games like Link to the Past, and even like some original stuff and stuff from even other 2D games as well. Like there's a lot of resources as well, like for coding as well. Like there's some preset scripts you can get. It's got a lot of really neat resources, and it's fit with a lot of neat stuff. But this was my first game that I made, and of course, as with most people's first games, there of course had a lot of issues. It was definitely a learning experience for sure, but ultimately, of course, at the end of the day, that's kind of how I see this game these days. It was definitely a learning experience. The game itself was very Zelda oriented. It had dungeons. It had pretty much what you would expect from a Zelda game. Although the story was mainly like a bunch of inside jokes, which I kind of did just to make building the game a little bit easier. But so it had pretty goofy stuff like that. Now I know obviously this presentation is going to be about the slipstream, but I'm kind of leading on to how like the development of that started and how I got to the point of where I got to with the slipstream. Well, I'll add a little bit more context as we go here. One thing I will show, adding on to that versatility of ZC, I'm gonna show an example of a few other games that have been made in ZC, because there are two main points I want to make about ZC that'll help me to set the context of slipstream's development a little bit easier. And the first thing, of course, is the versatility I was talking about before with ZC. The thing I actually found really fascinating and actually picked up for myself pretty quickly was that there were, while there were mostly, of course, Zelda-based related games, given it was a fan-made Zelda engine, there were a number of people I noticed that were also using the engine to make original stories and original gameplay elements with it, but using ZC as their resource doing so, like kind of the outlet for it. And I thought that was really, really cool, and it's something that I started to pick up on myself and wanted to use it as kind of my own personal storytelling outlet. So here's a few examples of some games. These are not my games, but these are some games that are released that have been released throughout the years on ZC, and this also kind of gives you an idea of how versatile this program is. I've said versatile a lot, I know, but my point is that you can see like up there, like the top left game is a game called Your End. It's a Metroidvania game, and you break blocks, and you can there's like hidden blocks that can be broken, some that can't, and there's like secrets you can do, or some secrets you can find rather in unique areas, and then like on the bottom right there is a game, I think it's called Forbidden Ascent, and that's as you can probably tell there, it's a 2D side scroller with a side view perspective. So you can even do side view. You can even have areas in your game that are side view. So this is all four of these, all with the same engine that is based purely off of the original Zelda for the NES. And this is just a testament to how much ZC has improved over the original Zelda as far as like what it can do and how much you can work with on it. The second thing, so that was the first thing. The second thing is how the community works. So ZC, especially back then, hadn't been as much the case lately, but especially back in that day, like back in 2014, 2015, they used to host a lot of contests. There is one they're still hosting now, called Screenshot of the Week, where essentially you take a screenshot of your game and you post it, and people vote on what the best screenshot is, like visually and with visuals and presentation, of course. And that's something they do every week. So they have a lot of really neat contests like that. A lot of interactive stuff. One thing that was occasionally done here and there was something called a two week contest, where essentially you have 2 weeks to build a game in ZC, and that was the contest. And I think stuff like that has been done in game festivals as well. I believe, but that was something that I noted. That was something that was actually being hosted in 2014, I think it was, and I decided to give it a whirl myself, and ended up making a game called Spirit Forest. Oh wow, I forgot about that slide too. That's what the website looks like. The website that they use is purezc.net. They were very heavily forum based back in the day, which they still are. Like, this forum's still pretty active, but they're also on Discord as well now. But for this 2-week quest contest that I participated in 2014, it was also a random theme contest. So not only did you have to build a game in 2 weeks, but you're also given a random theme. And my theme for this contest was an adventure game where you meet forest spirits in the darkest of caves. So I made a game called Spirit Forest. Essentially, what it entailed is you explored this forest. So there were like three different forest areas you're gonna explore, and there were 2 dungeons at each end. And then after you beat the dungeons, and you go beat the final boss. And as the as the random theme entailed, you also meet spirits in caves, and they can give you stuff, give you information. One thing I also had in this game was the ability to choose between an offensive and defensive weapon type. And so essentially this offered a bit more replayability to the game, to where you could choose to have offensive weapons, which are stronger weapons, more long-range weapons, the ability to slash your sword instead of just stabbing it, like you do in the original Zelda. Or defensive weapons, where you're a lot stronger, you can tank a lot more, but you don't do nearly as much damage. Something like that. And this game was kind of what helped set me off into doing more original stuff, because even like the story was original. There wasn't really like much Zelda aspect in its story. I mean, you were exploring a forest full of spirits, and the ending especially very different from a Zelda game. Other like the dungeons were really the only thing that I guess you could say were Zelda related. In this contest, this game actually won the contest. I mean, it was between like 6 people, so I was pretty proud about that, and that definitely helped build my confidence in game design a lot. Where I could basically, like, the way I saw it was, if I can come from a game like Lost Identity, which was pretty messy, much what you would expect from first game, and then go to this one and win a contest with my second game, it felt pretty good, and it made me feel confident in what I could do with the program. And so this leads us to Slipstream. I made Slipstream in 2015, another 2-week quest contest. Now, the difference in this 2-week contest compared to the previous one was was one that was hosted by one of the members of the community. This next one was a little bit more official, where one of the admins of the community were hosting it. So it was a bit of a bigger deal. So I definitely wanted to participate in it. And the difference with this one is it wasn't a random themed one like the other one was. However, one gimmick that was a part of it was you were allowed to set up like the coding, the scripts, set up graphics, enemies, items, pretty much do like any preliminary work 2 weeks prior to the starting period of the contest. Basically, you can do anything except for actually making areas and making cutscenes or like adding to the game, like just the preliminary stuff. With that in mind, I was able to make something a little bit more in depth and a lot more content filled than Spirit Forest was, which was about like an hour or two worth of gameplay, essentially. Which, I mean, obviously you would expect from a 2-week game. Also, I was using simpler graphics than what I was using for Lost Identity, so that I can make better looking screens faster. So I've been mentioning the Slipstream a lot, and so I think it's finally time to talk about what is the Slipstream. What is this game, Joaish? Tell us about this game. So the Slipstream is a Metroidvania with a ton of exploration. There are eight unique areas in it, and essentially what the game is about is you explore so you play as Hirota, and Hirota lives in this world where there's this big wormhole in the middle of it. Anyone who enters this wormhole is never seen again. Like they've never come out of this wormhole, and this wormhole is called the Slipstream. And suddenly one day, monsters were coming out of the Slipstream and pulling people into the Slipstream. And Hirota's best friend and grandmother were pulled into the Slipstream as well. And so Hirota jumped into the Slipstream willingly to go rescue them. Come to find out, the Slipstream is actually made of multiple different themed areas. And the way you traverse through these little areas inside the Slipstream is through these Slipstream portals. And what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to pull up a playthrough I did of the game on my stream for its 3-year anniversary of the Definitive Edition. I'm just gonna show a little bit of what the game looks like, and you can kind of see how the engine works as well. This is the intro cutscene showing Hirota jumping into the Slipstream. You get difficulty. You can choose your difficulty here. The difficulty is mainly based on damage. So you meet this guy, and he tells you that he leads this refuge of survivors in the Slipstream, and so he gives you this crystal that you can use to warp to town from anywhere you are. And so when he gives you this crystal, you're able, like I said before, you're able to go to the town. When you do that, you get to meet some of the survivors of the slipstream. Let me fast forward a little bit here. And the refuge also introduces some of the elements of the game. One thing I showed here on the description here is that the game also has an elemental combat system to encourage a variety of use for weapons. And I mentioned also right before because I was talking a little bit about the game before the presentation started, how the game also has a blend of combat and puzzles. Mostly combat just because of the unique combat system this game provides. But as you can see, as you explore the refuge, you can come across the information you need to traverse through the slipstream. And so here this guy is explaining the elemental system, and basically how it works is there's 4 elements. You have fire, water, energy, and slipstream material, which I called Sliptonite. and they're all assigned a color. They're red, blue, green, and purple. The way it works is that each element has a weakness to another weapon. So fire is strong against water, and vice versa. And then energy is strong against Sliptonite, and vice versa. The way it works. So say I have a fire weapon. You come across water enemy. And you attack the water enemy with your fire weapon. It will do most damage you can do with your weapons on that enemy. It does normal damage to that enemy. However, if you come across enemy with a different element, like say energy or slipstream material, then your fire weapon will do half damage because you're not attacking it with the element it's weak to. However, if you attack an enemy with the same element as your item, so say you have a fire weapon and you attack a fire enemy will block it. So with how this elemental system is set up, it encourages you to cycle through your items and not just use like one item or one item, maybe 2. It encourages you to use a variety of different items based on the types of enemies you're encountering. So you often find yourself swapping through different items and trying to find the best combination of items to use to efficiently defeat enemies and survive. So yeah, long story short, weapons that are stronger against an enemy do normal damage. Weapons that are not really related to each other do about half damage, and then using the same element against an enemy will just block it. You won't be able to do any damage to them. And so as you explore a little bit more, also to make the lore a little bit more unique, because Slipstream, other than I guess Spirit Forest, Slipstream is also the first game I released where it has a completely unique story. Obviously, it still uses some of the Zelda aspects to it, but one thing I changed was the currency. And the currency is stopwatches, which the original idea for using stopwatches as a currency was an idea I had for a Majora's Mask based game, which was based off of time. I instead moved this idea of using stopwatches as a currency into this game. But one unique thing about the stopwatches being currency is ammunition for one of the items. So if you played the original Zelda before, you may remember that the bow and arrow actually uses rupees as arrows. So anytime you shoot an arrow, it spins a rupee. Now in ZC, you can either have the option to still do that, or you can change it to where you actually use arrows as ammunition separate from rupees. However, in this one, I kept the ammunition the same as money. Made an item called the Energy Hand Shooter, and so essentially you were shooting you're shooting the hands of the stopwatches as weapons, as projectiles, like kind of like arrows. So you're spinning your stopwatches to shoot the hands of the stopwatches, which I was pretty happy with how that came out. Whenever there we go. Okay. So you also get to see the level up system in this game, and you're essentially for this game you're spending stopwatches to level up. At the start of the game encourages you to explore this first area and to find these stopwatches. As you can see here, found 5 stopwatches there. Once you also get a key to open a locked door here. And once you get the amount of stopwatches required to get your first level up, then it gives you your first item. And the first item you get is a Slip-to-Night candle, so it's a purple weapon. So with that, you get to fight enemies to kind of get even further, like a general idea of how the element system works. Pretty much all the enemies in this area have 4 hit points. Actually 2 hit points. So, for example, as you can see here, it takes 4 hits instead for the Slip-to-Night candle to defeat the blue enemies, and then of course against the energy, which Slip-to-Night is strong against. It takes 2 hits for that weapon to defeat it, and purple against purple, the enemy blocks it and it's not going to be damaged by it. So at the moment you can't even defeat purple enemies yet until you have another item. And so the way you travel through each area is after you beat a boss, after you beat the boss of the area, then you get an artifact. And that artifact will open up these slipstream portals in the area, and those will lead to new areas. And the cycle kind of repeats for all the other areas. You'll enter a new area, you'll find a new item with its own element paired to it, and you'll beat a boss to open up slipstream portals to go to the next area. That's kind of the basic idea of how the game works. You travel through these different areas, and as you can see here, you travel through the slipstream portal to go to a completely different themed area. Well, hold on 1 second here. Catch up on my notes. I kind of escaped my notes a little bit here. Yeah, so like I said before, this game was a part of the 2-week quest contest in 2015. So I made a lot of, let me try that again. Try no more words. I made essentially the elemental system and a lot of the graphics beforehand, as per the rules of the contest. Those are the things I mostly did beforehand. Like getting the enemies set up and all the elemental systems to work as it should, with the weapon damages and all that. It took a little bit to get down, but fortunately we were allowed that time for the preliminary stuff to be able to do that. So then for each area, from what I remember, I think for each area I spent about 2 to 5 hours depending on how the area went. So I spent about roughly that amount of time, like 2 to 5 hours each day, like working on the game, trying to get it out before the deadline. And it worked out pretty well. Like if I remember correctly, I didn't really feel too terribly rushed. Honestly, like the hardest part about 2-week contests is getting the game done before even like a week and a half, so that you have like a couple of days to run through the game and test it like really quickly. Because not only do you have to build the game, but you also have to test it and make sure everything works well. So there is also that extra pressure with that included. So for the 2 weeks, I was able to get the game done. I lost my thought there again. Yeah, I was able to get it done, and for this contest, so for the last I don't think I made this entirely clear, but the contest is determined by votes, and community members will take about a week or two to play the games, and then they'll vote on the games after a certain period of time after being able to play the games. The same was true here, except there were also a bunch of other rewards as well. Oh, nice. Also a bunch of other rewards as well. You also see the Zelda 1 influence on this engine with the continue, save, and retry there. That also kind of gives away that it's highly based off of Zelda 1. So for this contest, I actually was able get to the right slide. This contest, I actually won. I won second place in this contest, and the game overall was received really well, which I was surprised. I was surprised about at the time. It also won the Innovation Award and the Balanced Award, essentially being the most innovative quest. The most innovative game. They call them quests in the community. The most innovative game in the contest, and also the most balanced in the contest, which is especially hard to do given that 2 weeks and given that that short testing period. So I was pretty happy about that. It was received pretty well, and the funny thing is, and it's really funny because it's still this fact is still in effect even to this day. At the very end, at the last moment, at the final boss, you get a little bit of story, you get a little bit of lore. But I decided to end it in a cliffhanger because I thought it would be more interesting of an ending instead of just the Hirota found his grandmother and best friend. Hooray, the end. And so because of that, I am actually working. I will go ahead and say I am working on a sequel to this game as well. But before all that, there actually is a little bit more to this game's development. And I guess if you don't mind, I'll go back to this. So there's something playing in the background. Because there is more to the story about Slipstream's development. I made the game in 2 weeks, which of course that definitely leaves it with its set of issues, because any game made in 2 weeks will of course have issues or oversights because of how quickly and rushed it was developed. And given how well received the game was, I definitely wanted to release a version of this game that would be good for the community's database and be a good showcase of the game and let the game live up to its full potential. So my original plan for it was that I would actually make a sequel in the original game. Like I would just add a bunch of extra areas after you beat what was the original game, the original game's ending in the original version. And so, but what ended up happening with that is that I ended up feeling it didn't work out as well because of how it was balanced. Like it felt weird to just leave behind like a full area that could have a lot of potential to it be explored and just kind of leave it to the dust to go to more areas, especially since this game was balanced initially just for these 8 areas. So what ended up happening was that I instead was thinking, okay, I could either add the rest of the story into this game, or I can make a sequel later on. Now, unfortunately, at around that time, around 2016 or 2017, which keep in mind, I was also trying to work on other bigger projects as well, which will actually lead me to one of my points near the end of the presentation. I was working on some other projects as well, and I also did another 2-week contest later on, but around like 2016, 2017, I was kind of getting burnt out because I'd been doing this like a lot, like consecutively, and what also was wearing me down was the fact that I didn't know how to script, didn't know how to code either And that kind of stuff was really essential for making really good bosses, because as versatile as the program is, that there was only so much that the enemy editor could do that I would have wanted it to do. And back then, especially, I was really busy in my personal life, and I couldn't really put down the time to learn coding. And so I ended up. Well, what ended up happening is that issue kind of got solved as far as the enemies go. That issue kind of got solved from the fact that someone had released a script for making enemies. And so essentially it was kind of a skeleton, and you kind of just fill in the blanks for what you want, and that script will build the boss like how you want. And it was a pretty easy way to make pretty quality bosses, and that kind of helped get my motivation up a little bit more, because I wanted to redo a lot of the bosses in Slipstream anyways, because all of them were use this somewhat limited enemy editor. So my new plan was that I would make a sequel later. And my plan for a post game was that I would make a bunch of trials. The plan for the post game was that I was going to give you more level ups. However, in order to level up past the original max level point, you would have to collect these relics. So if you were to essentially just play the main game, you would only be able to level up to the point you were able to in the 2-week version. Because I'm kind of the belief that if you're making, like, if I'm adding to a game that I've already made, I'd like to keep at least some semblance of what was originally there, which was kind of my problem with adding on to making the sequel in the original games. I felt like that kind of took away from what made the original good, if that makes sense. So what this post game also does is it adds a whole lot more that you can explore throughout, like, the main world, like the main 8 areas that are already presented. Even like these there's also these trials where you're exploring the areas in black and white, and so you actually can't see the colors and the elements of the enemies. So you have to, like, have the enemies memorized on what element they have, and like stuff like that. And essentially, like, there's stuff like that. Some other bosses you can fight. My main goal of the post game was to let the combat system shine a bit more, because by the time you get the post game, you have all the items, and at that point you're just trying to upgrade them, and it's letting the elemental system kind of shine a little bit more through the, like, maybe some of the secret bosses. Like there's one secret boss at the end that gives a secret ending at the very end. And so what ended up happening was I still ended up getting burnt out after I made at least most of the post game. Like, I kind of got a little bit. I think I got frustrated in the development. I wasn't feeling as confident with what I was making. And so this was around the time I started getting into streaming, and this is where my streaming and speedrunning kind of took off from there. And I started picking up that as a hobby. However, in 2019. I came back to the slipstream because I was kind of curious. I'm curious, like, how close I was to finishing. I was looking back at it, and I replayed through the entirety of Slipstream, and to my surprise, the game was essentially finished, like post game and all. There were just a couple of things that needed to be added, and a few things here and there that needed to be fixed. But I surprised myself because apparently I had, like, actually finished the majority of the game, like, 2 years prior, and then didn't release it. But it did get released, and the definitive edition of the Slipstream, which you can play now, was released in 2019 with this post game, and also a bit more added balance to the game, and other fixes from the original 2-week version. And with that all being said as well, the community also holds these superlatives, and they give out a bunch of rewards to community members, like best screenshot of the year, best script of the year, best there's joke ones that are like best forum post of the year, But one of them is also Game of the Year, which in 2019, Slipstream actually got Game of the Year for 2019. So Slipstream ended up being something I became incredibly proud of, and it was something that ended up being a lot better than I was initially expecting it to be, and the reception for it was definitely really nice. So, I just noticed what time it was too. Let me hurry up through my last couple of points. One thing I do want to quickly bring up, which I want to say has maybe not been brought up, just based on the fact. Well, okay. I feel like this particular subject may not have been brought up because I may be the only speedrunner that's a game developer, but speedruns of my game. So a Ocarina of Time glitchless runner by the name of Bear, he actually got into speedrunning the Slipstream, which actually got me interested in seeing like what kind of things can be found in my game. Which, for those that are unfamiliar, that maybe a little bit more unfamiliar with speedrunning, speedrunning also uses glitches that are in the game to do sequence breaks and to try to beat the game as fast as possible. There are also like other categories too, like 100%, like get all the items, like all, like in the case of most Zelda games, like all dungeons is a category where you have to beat all the dungeons. And for this game actually turns out there actually were a lot of sequence breaks that were found in the game by Chef Bear. So when the speedrun started, I tried some speedruns in my own game just for the fun of it. And originally starting out, like speedruns were around like 30 minutes on there. But then there were some things that got found that let you like go out of bounds and skip some areas. You could bring abilities that are unique to one area and bring them to other areas, and that lets you get into areas you're not supposed to. And what ended up happening is that there was a thing found where you could escape the intro of the game and go straight to a screen that's on the ending of the main game. So because of that, the game speedrun went from 29 minutes or so to 56 seconds. And so it turns out there were some sequence breaks that slipped my view. The reason why the intro escaping the game's introductory cutscene works is that you can still move around in cutscenes. It's just that the player can be made invisible, so you don't see like a HUD or your character while cutscenes are playing, but they're playing on these different screens. If you hold left for the entirety of like a certain part of the intro, I guess since I was rushed during the 2-week time constraint, I didn't put barriers around the screens, so you can actually just walk out of the intro cutscene and then go right to one of the ending screens. I say all this, and this is probably something really unusual for me to say as a game designer, which leads me to how do I feel about speedruns in my own game. Now this is me personally, and I wanted to kind of give this unique perspective on it. And since I speedrun some games myself, to me, seeing sequence breaks that do not affect the casual experience of the game. Like you're not going to run into these kind of sequence breaks because they're really obscure. That they don't affect the casual play, but you can use as a speedrun. I think it's really interesting to see the game being played from a different perspective, like seeing how this game that I created and knowing like all that went on through its development and why I put certain things in certain places and how those things were exported. It was really unique kind of seeing how that process went out and how it ended up being how it is now. And to me, like speedruns also offer a lot of extra replayability and other ways to play the game with like different categories too that you can do. It offers like another way to play the game, and that's something I really like. Like you have the casual experience and the normal gameplay, and then you have kind of the more competitive aspect in a way of a game. And again, like it's interesting seeing how those restrictions were gotten around. And okay, so three things real quick, and then we can get to questions. Three points I kind of want to go through. Like these are three main points that I learned throughout my experience with game design through Zelda Classic. First one being creativity through limitation. Like finding ways to get around limitations of the engine, and in the case of the contest, constraint to time. Like I had a lot of limitations making this game with, like I said before, not knowing how to code, which I am actually learning coding now, and I do have a basic knowledge of coding. Like I did do one bit of coding for the level up system in this game. However, if you saw the script, you would tell it's very basic because it's just a bunch of if statements. Which for those that don't know coding, that's one of the basic coding functions. But like essentially using the unique limitations that ZC offers, making something out of that and putting something together and working around those limitations, I feel like it provides a unique sense of creativity on how you do that, and it's something that used to be present in a lot of older games. How they're working around the limitations of the engines back in the day, like trying to fit everything in that they wanted to, not using too much memory. And essentially the same thing here with like maybe what you can do in this engine and coming up with unique ways to get around certain obstacles. There's the thing I learned here is that there's a lot. I feel like to me there's a lot of respect and creativity through stuff like this, where you don't have all the tools in your hand to do just literally whatever you want, but you use like limited tools to put together something that is unique and still works out well. The second thing is simplicity as an art form, and the reason I described the game's introduction the way I did was to kind of show off how simple I ended up making the intro of the game. I put you in a world. I gave you things that introduced concepts of the game. I showed off the elemental system in one place and showed off the level up system. And then I gave you a taste of how to level up by going and finding stopwatches to level up with. And by leveling up, I give you an item to then further experiment with this elemental system. It's put into place in the combat. From there, you just explore. You have the basic ideas of the game, and you just explore. And the gameplay itself, with its combination of combat and puzzles, kind of presents like a somewhat simplistic gameplay aspect to it. But something I learned, especially coming off of doing like a more complex project. Like I learned that sometimes keeping things simple can make things seem more complex even by how it's presented. It can have a more natural flow to it. Like Slipstream only has very few cutscenes here and there, but I feel like it's also introduced a lot of lore into it based off of the environment just by exploring and the little bit you get off of cutscenes. And lastly, is being confident in your work. Like I mentioned before, before I got burnt out during the development of the post game, I wasn't feeling confident in what I made. But when I initially released it, it ended up being received pretty well. And I guess the thing I learned from that is to always be confident in the kind of work you do. It's really easy. I think we'll all be able to relate that it is really easy to not feel good about what we're making since we see it 24/7. We've thought about it more than anyone else has, and it's easy to like not see it from from another perspective. And that's actually something that kind of helped me with taking a break from the development. Was I was able to see it more as I was able to see my own game more as a player because I didn't look or see the game for like a little over a year. So I kind of just I saw the game with fresh eyes, and it allowed me to. It definitely helped me to be a bit more confident in my work, and that's kind of the thing. I guess that's kind of the thing I'm leaving off with is always be confident in what you make, and if it works out, great. If it doesn't, then at the end of the day, you know what to fix, you know what to work on from there in order to further improve your game design work going into the future. Kind of like how with my first game, I learned a lot from that and took that and applied it to these future games, or to where we are now. Yeah, that's what I have for the presentation. We can I'm good to go with questions if we have any.
Yeah, Dylan, are you still? Is your connection better?
Yeah, I was about to ask, can you guys hear me right now?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So, yeah, right now is Q&A time. So if anyone has questions, please ask them right now. Or we still have the chance. But I think I can go up first and ask. So for your animations in your game, what did you use to make your animations?
So in ZC, you're given the ability to. So you have a big sprite sheet, and that has all your still images, like all your graphics, including all of the different points of animation. So the way ZC does animations is it does them through these tile sheets. So like say you have someone walking, for example, and it has like 4 different frames to it walking. You'll make a combo, or what's called a combo to start on that first tile, and then tell it to go to the next 4 tiles, and then it'll just loop between those 4 tiles. So like go through all the tiles and then go like repeat it essentially. So ZC has its own built-in animation features to be able to have moving parts and to have like more vibrant movement. Yes, let me get the site here. I'll go ahead and put it in speaker text. If y'all don't mind as well, if y'all don't mind if I put my Slipstream doc. I have a Google Doc of all the things like Slipstream related. If y'all don't mind me posting that here as well. Sure. So that website there, that's the forums for ZC, and that gives you some more information on ZC and where to download it as well. And then this document right here, this is a document I made to kind of give all the information for Slipstream to kind of make it easier for people who also may not know how ZC works to kind of get into it and to be able to play the game. Mostly made this for my stream, since a good number of people didn't know what ZC was until my stream. But that document will have like the download links that are required, and even some of the speedrunning stuff too is on there as well. I will go ahead and say the most up-to-date version of ZC is 2.55. However, I would highly recommend playing on 2.53 for the time being, because I've discovered recently there's a game-breaking bug on 2.55 at the moment, and I'm hopefully going to get around soon to figuring out why that's the case. So for the time being, if you would like to try out the game, I would recommend playing it in 2.53. Yeah, that's all the information for ZC in general, and also for Slipstream specifically. Which, by the way, there's a lot of really good games on there. If you go on the ratings page on the list of games, most of those games, like on the top, like the top ratings, are a lot of them I highly recommend.
Actually, I do have a question about ZC.
All right.
Yeah, okay, so when was it made, and how often does it get updated?
So it was originally made back in I think 1999 or 2000. It might have been 2000 actually. It was made all the way back on like Windows 98, and I think they were just I think it originally wasn't going to be like what it is today with like an editor and all that. At the moment, it's being updated fairly regularly. I believe 'cause I've only recently just gotten back into ZC again to start working on the sequel to Slipstream. Um, I think there's a new dev team as well working on ZC, and from what I can tell, they've been posting regular updates for version 2.55. Hopefully soon that bug I mentioned before will be fixed when I get the stuff communicated and worked out. At the moment, it's being currently developed and updated as we speak. Because I believe 2.55 is still technically in beta.
And then, in addition, I don't remember if you mentioned it, but does your game have music? And if it does, what did you do to make the game music?
Oh yes, so much like with ZC using Zelda as an asset, there's also a thing that they provide MIDIs for, because ZC either uses MIDIs or MP3s. In this case, back then MIDIs were more used back then. But for the music I used other game music, and this kind of goes along with the point I was making about creativity through limitation. I didn't know how to make music either, so I was using a combination of music from other games. Like if you've ever seen like ROM hacks of games like Mario 64 where they're using music from other games, it's essentially like that. Like there's some Donkey Kong Country music in there. Of course, all of them being fitting to each area, and representing, which that kind of thing does lead to some unique combinations of music. Like there's one area that's moon, that's the theming of it is based on the moon, and like I use the one of the ice themes from Donkey Kong Country, and it ended up kind of just fitting really well with this area too. So, long story short, the music is also used from various different games. You can also have music if you know how to make that.
Yeah, but just out of curiosity, what did you do to like edit the music, or did you even edit the music at all?
I didn't edit the music. No, these are the music I used were MIDIs from that other people made, essentially.
All right, and then so I remember you were talking about how when you were doing your game contest, right? You were kind of feeling burnt out. In what ways do you recommend trying to keep like a healthy schedule while doing game contests?
For contests, I would definitely say don't develop or don't spend all day doing. Well, okay. Wait, I'll put it this way. You want to first have a reasonable length for your game. A reasonable length that you know you can get completed without having to completely like throw yourself in a fire to try to get done and completely panic at the last second because there's so much to do. So you want to have a reasonable length for your game. The reason I was able to make Slipstream a little bit longer than say the first contest that I did for Spirit Forest was because of that time beforehand where we were able to set up some things beforehand. But I was able to for Slipstream I was able to make each area in about 2 to 5 hours depending on the area. But what I would recommend for contests like this is to pace yourself properly, to fit your schedule, and to kind of plan ahead to know what you're kind of getting into, and to have plans for backups in case some things don't work out and you end up having to work a little bit longer on some places than expected, and also definitely leave plenty of room for testing as well. Basically, you don't want to overburden yourself with the game you're making. If you want to be able to finish it and finish it with the least amount of stress as possible, make it manageable. And always remember that if it's a game that you want to finish afterwards, then you're always welcome to finish it outside the contest, and even then, like outside the contest, that gives you the ability to have all the time you want to add what you want to add to the game. You can technically also see that as you could technically also see like the contest as a way to like encourage creativity on starting a new project. Essentially, that's kind of how it was a Slipstream. Like Slipstream would have never been made if it wasn't for the contest, and whether it would have finished or not, like the idea would have still been there. That was a very long answer for that very basic question, but yeah.
No, I think it's important. I think a lot of people deal with burnout. It's just a very natural thing, and to prevent it is a very good advice to give.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, for the burnout thing, definitely like pacing yourself and knowing when to stop is pretty key to preventing burnout. Like definitely, like don't overdo it. That's something I've also especially learned with speedrunning as well. Is don't do too much.
Sorry. You mentioned using an enemy boss code for reference, like for its skeleton. Do you still have the source for that?
Yes, I do. Let me pull it up real quickly. I'll pull up the thing I use for it. So this this is the script I used for the bosses for the definitive edition. And that video that video that's linked on that page also kind of shows off how much you can do with the bosses. The difference between not using the script, the difference between not using the script and using the enemy editor versus either using the script or scripting the bosses yourself is that if you're just using the enemy editor, you're kind of constrained to certain forms of movement and also certain attack patterns. Like there's only so much you can do to make it interesting, and spanning across eight different areas with 8 different bosses, like there's only so much I could do. And I was also wanting to prevent just putting in like Zelda 1 bosses, because that's been done to death in ZC. Something like that, something like the boss script definitely helped me to build bosses that have a little bit more personality to them.
Yeah, and to be Vivian's voice, I saw in chat she asked, since you did stream your playthrough and there are speedruns of your game, has being a streamer helped your development in any way? Also, as an addition to that, do you think there are benefits to working with speedrunners during development?
I definitely think there are benefits to having speedrunners a part of the development, or at least have like input on the game, because speedrunners can see the game in a very unique way, especially if they're a long-time speedrunner or they're also a glitch hunter as well. They know kind of what to look for, because they've seen games be broken, and they kind of know what to look for, because they play the same game over and over. And I know, at least with me, like ever since I started speedrunning and getting into it, like any other game I've played, sometimes even I'm looking for for ways to do some things faster, or like ways to export it. I feel like speedrunners can maybe have a keener eye for things that could be broken, and like broken that would like need to be fixed. So I think there's definitely a huge benefit to having speedrunners as far as the development. Now as far as streamer helping me in development, Cheffer has offered to help test the sequel, which I think something like that, like having speedrunners help test the sequel would be a huge advantage for that. And even if they find like a sequence break that doesn't affect casual play, I mean, I'd probably keep it in just for the fun of it, as long as it doesn't affect the casual play. I don't know. It's definitely like speedrunners provide a very unique perspective on games, so I think there's definitely a benefit to see like that unique perspective in comparison to for a more casual audience.
Yeah, and I think we'll close with one last question. So since these contests we call them game jams elsewhere outside of the community, and how do you encourage others to play your game to increase your game rating since it's community voted? Or does the ZC community kind of do that themselves?
ZC community kind of did it themselves. ZC is a fairly small community. But it wasn't as small back then because like one of the major updates of the game had released in, and there was like a huge surge of popularity back then. But back then, like stuff like that had a bit more focus to them, and a lot of people would just play all the games, and they would post like the reviews on them, like on the forums that had the contests on them. Like you would probably see like 5 or 6 different people like posting like mini reviews of each game, like kind of talking about what worked, what didn't work. So it was kind of cool in that sense. But if I were to say like what I would do to help encourage people to play the game more, well, I mean what I did was just kind of show off the game with the screenshots and describe how the game is, which I mean that's kind of a basic answer, because like every game on Slipstream's contest, every one of us had their own separate forum page for it, so we were able to have like a kind of a display for our game to kind of show off what it looks like and what it's about, and then the download link for it, of course.
So this is not a question, but Zucchini said that you have the comfiest looking chair.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, this chair became a big meme on my stream, so yeah. Sometimes I forget about that, but yeah, I love this chair.
You gotta say these things out loud, man.
I do. I was gonna see. I was thinking about it earlier. I was like, I gotta mention the chair. People are gonna be wondering why I'm presenting on this huge, massive chair. But yeah, no, like this is the chair I sit on at my desk. I'm not even kidding. It's a recliner. It is a recliner because one day, like several years ago, where I was living at the time, this was like one of the only seats I could really use. So I was like, okay, I'll use this. It wasn't being used in the living room or whatever. And then everyone that came in my stream was like, "Whoa, that's an awesome chair!" And then one day I wasn't sitting in the chair because it was being used for something else. And then people were all like, "No, it's a chair. Where is it? No, this ain't right."
Yes, you're good.
So I brought the chair back.
But if you want to read the chat, because I'm not going to read it out loud anymore. But Zucchini said another comment. It's on the voice call chat.
Voice call chat. Where is that?
Now Discord's kind of confusing. I'll just read it. But it said, dude is a game dev and winning the Game of Thrones.
Yeah. Oh, I found the chat. Here it is.
Yeah.
Here we go. Yay.
Alright. No, you're
building the games and sitting on the throne.
Alright, but I think that unless other people have like questions and haven't asked yet, I think we're probably gonna close that up this talk. So thank you so much for coming to talk with us. And we'll send you the recording when we finish the edits over the course of this month, and we'll put your resources in the resources channel to live, hopefully forever, but we don't know what future management of this club will do.
Fair enough. Awesome. Thank you so much for having me on here. Thank you for inviting me and having me on. This was a lot of fun. Yeah, hope you guys have a great night.
Yeah, you as well. And goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.
See y'all.